Hello there, welcome to the Saroy channel. How are you doing? I do hope you're doing very well. I'm doing fabulous, thank you very much. And I love hearing from you, so thank you so much for all your lovely comments. I love hearing about what you're drinking and whereabouts in the world you're from. And it's amazing how widespread we all are, but it's fabulous coming together like this to listen to a lovely story. And I've got one for you tonight that you're really going to enjoy. So before we get started, don't forget to get that lovely drink. Keep yourself lovely and warm. And of course, if you're in a hot part of the world, keep yourself lovely and cool. And let's get started with tonight's story. But before we do, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, click the notification bell and the thumbs up. And let's get started. Dear Sarah and all your lovely listeners, my nonconformist capricious parents always did things exceedingly differently. That was the way they were. So when they bought an abandoned property in the Blue Ridge Mountains in October of 2013, it didn't come as a big surprise to me. They always acted impulsively and did idiosyncratic off-the-cuff things without giving them too much thought about the ramifications of some of their choices. My impetuous father always believed that in life you needed to make decisions promptly, as otherwise the opportunity might abandon you like a balloon on the wind and fly away. He had learnt that growing up to his disadvantage when his ambiguous parents failed to make any prompt decisions in regards to his own life. They had missed out on buying a phenomenal home once because his father had dilly-dallied about whether to put an offer in on the place or not, so in the end they'd brought a much more mediocre home. Another time his parents had vacillated about what holiday destination to choose. They dithered so much in finalising their arrangements, so in the end they had to settle for a less than adequate holiday that still had available bookings that ended up being less than satisfactory, with inadequate accommodation, abysmal service, poor food, and bed bugs in the bed. My father never forgot the ambivalence of his parents. It cost his family much in his young life, so now he had his favourite saying, which was, if you snooze, you lose. The thing that disturbed me the most about the property we had purchased was that no one knew what had happened to the previous owners, as by all accounts they'd fled the property, were registered as missing, presumed dead as far as I can gather. They had never even accessed even their bank accounts or been in touch with any family members. I mean, how do 4 people vanish off the face of the earth just like that, without so much as a trace? It does leave you pondering as to what on earth could have happened to them. The 1870 property was auctioned by the bank and was in a dreadful state of disrepair. Luckily the roof was still in good condition, which was its only saving grace, but many of the structural walls were crumbling, while the wooden windows had warped, twisted and buckled, and the floorboards had become badly damaged. The haunting property still contained the previous owner's furniture that was once grandiose for its time, but now stuck in a 1970s time warp. Many of the upholstered furnishings were now threadbare. A family of mice were happily nesting in the confines of the settee. The once beautiful Persian rugs had been completely devoured by insatiable carpet moths. The place was caked with dust that was so thick you could write your name in it. Then there were mouse droppings, insect skeletons, and cobwebs everywhere. The most haunting thing of all was that the dining room table was still set for what must have been their last supper, as if something quite dreadful must have happened while they were eating their dinner. Dried up butternut squash appeared to be on their dinner plates, which gave me a horrible chill down my spine. What had happened that night to this poor innocent family? Whatever it was, it must have been quite terrible, I thought. I had discovered some airy photographs of the family lying around the place. They looked like decent people, a mother, a father, a boy and a girl, of similar ages to me and my sister Janice, between the ages of 11 and 13. But apart from a few fleeting photographs, some comic books and an old game of snakes and ladders, we knew nothing about the mysterious family that had previously lived in our home. We were exceedingly fortunate, if you can look at it from that perspective, that the property went for a song. My father snapped it up as quickly as possible. He was a master builder who'd built many wealthy people their dream home, from start to finish in all parts of America, from California to New York, Atlanta and Boston. So as a family we'd moved around a lot, as he was in building construction. He was determined to build us the quintessential asymmetrical contemporary modern home that we all hankered for, and so that is what he did. The kind with seamless finishes, a flat roof and extensive large living areas with huge floor-to-ceiling windows. My father was determined to make the house blend seamlessly into the environment, with a focus on maximising the panoramic views of the breathtaking countryside, which included the undulating contours of the mountains that dappled the distant horizon in a magnificent purple smoky haze. Then there were the verdant rolling hills, the pretty flowery meadows, the sculptural rocky outcrops, the enchanting silvery pond that was lavishly bespeckled with water lilies and teeming with frogs and fish. And last but not least, the viridescent forest that consisted primarily of maples and oak trees, which was teeming with an abundance of wildlife and a thriving deer population. Of course, my parents wanted to add all the extra niceties to the building project that had become much more recently fashionable, and of course added to the value and prestige of our home, rather like a dressing room for my mother, with a walk-in wardrobe and a stylish open-plan kitchen fitted with top-of-the-range kitchen units and granite surfaces, and of course sliding doors that opened out onto a sprawling entertainment area. The property was located on 40 acres of overgrown rambling brush. Grotesque, ugly-looking weeds and creeping variegated vines had spiralled their way through the old driveway and around the house, transforming the yard into a dense jungle and rambunctious thicket, so my father had to hire a landscape gardener to transform the yard. Let's just say it was a mammoth project, and the landscape gardener had to make a plethora of trips to the dump, as there was so much yard waste. At first glance, I was absolutely furious that my dad had bought such a sinister-looking property that just looked creepy and oppressive. It was hard for me to see the potential of something as hideously ugly as this vacant home. It truly looked like a derelict, haunted location, hardly the kind of property I'd be pleased to call home. Also, knowing that something dreadful may have happened to the previous occupants did nothing to dull my deep cynicism about my father's impulsive purchase. While the building was in progress, we stayed in a trailer on the premises. There were many times I cursed the very day my father had taken on such a long-suffering building project. I think we all felt the same way. I assure you there's nothing more tedious than waking up every morning to the sounds of workmen knocking away and hammering at chipboard while you live a cramped life cooped up in a trailer. It was hard for me to see my father's vision for the place. All I could see was a huge mess and an overgrown jungle. But I'm glad to say, to my father's credit, he had a great vision, as we saw the old dilapidated building beginning to take on some pleasing shapes. When parts of the old house were in the throes of being demolished, we noticed other details about the house that we'd previously overlooked. There were some deep, angry gashes that could be seen all over the wooden panels of the house, almost as if someone had deliberately tried to vandalize the place. There were several windows that had been broken through and heavily boarded up from the inside out by the previous owners, almost as if they'd been trying to keep something out. Even crazier were the inside doors that were bolted up like Fort Knox with double locks. There were metal-barred security gates erected on the inside of every bedroom. The kitchen back door and the front door as well. I don't know why we'd overlooked these minor details that didn't seem so minor at all in the grand overall scheme of things. Whoever had owned this house had gone to extreme lengths in regards to their stringent security measures, which seemed excessive for an idyllic location like the Blue Ridge Mountains. Something must have freaked the family out so significantly. For whatever it was, I hoped and prayed that it wouldn't come after us. On the 25th of February 2014, we'd finally moved into our beautiful new home and were no longer residing in the trailer. But it was on March the 3rd, 2014, when our area was hit with the most terrible heavy snow, sleet and frozen rain. And areas around our home like Oklahoma, New Jersey and Virginia were hit really badly. There were major problems in the Blue Ridge Mountain area and the Shenandoah Valley, including the Richmond area, as well as Interstates 81 and 64. So we were very badly affected by the extreme weather and suffered the ravages of sub-zero conditions, so our family was pretty much snowed in. The house was very warm. My mother busied herself making warming meals for us, and there was a crackling fire blazing away in the living room, keeping the house snug and cosy. I remember it was a bitterly cold winter's day. But as the yard had recently been renovated and completely cleared out, me and my sister Janice had discovered a lovely hilly slope at the far end of our property that was large enough for tobogganing. Despite the horrendous, harrowing weather conditions, we really wanted to try out our hand on the hilly slope. My mother wasn't keen on the idea. She suggested that there would be many other times in the future when the conditions would be less chaotic than they were now, when we could go tobogganing on the hill. But after much begging, she finally agreed, as long as my father would keep a watch over us. Me and Janice wasted no time in racing outdoors, warmly dressed in our anoraks, woolly hats, scarves and boots. I still remember how dreadfully cold it was. I could feel the icy sleet numbing my face. I knew my mother was right. These conditions were very crazy for tobogganing. My fingers, even inside my gloves, felt like icicles. But I wasn't going to return indoors with my tail between my legs, admitting that my mother was right. I was adventurous, always had been, and I was hardly going to let the bad weather stop me from having fun. Before long, Janice and I were enjoying ourselves going up and down the hilly slope on our toboggans. We felt exhilarated. Suddenly on my downward ride, I hit something hard that was sticking out of the snow and went flying in the air like a frisbee, finally landing on the soft snow in the lower valley beneath us. I'm glad to say that all that was wounded was my pride. I had landed in a crumpled heap at the bottom of the slope. My father was watching us with a look of amusement. I think he found my fall rather funny. He wasted no time in rushing up the hilly slope to investigate what it was that had tripped me up on my downhill ride. We discovered the end of a long pole of some kind jutting out of the hilly outcrop through to the exposed snow. We were curious to find out what it was. My father thought it was some kind of marker. He got his trowels out from the shed and proceeded to dig around the large pole. He dug away large layers of snow and dirt. We found ourselves faced with the most god-awful stench of such I do not have words in my vocabulary to describe. The undeniable smell of decaying flesh hit our nostrils hard. Whatever we were smelling must have been dead for quite a while. Suddenly my father's trowel hit a large hairy hand. I heard him say, "What the heck is this?" He continued to dig until the body of a large hairy monster was revealed. The creature looked mummified, but it was in remarkably good condition to be able to see very clearly, despite having been dead for so long and smelling deplorable. This strange, hideous, humanoid-looking beast, whatever in God's name it actually was covered all over its body from top to bottom with thick, dark brown hair, apart from the hairless face. The head was an unusual dome shape. It was literally attached to these humongous, rounded shoulders. The human-like face looked like it was weathered and old, because the protruding forehead was filled with deep, dense furrows. The skin was thickly textured like a rhino hide. The dead eyes stared up at us vacantly. They were a dark brown colour. But why were the eyes not empty sockets after all this time? Surely they should have been eaten by worms. None of this made any sense to us at all. The nose was so flat and squashed, it reminded me of a pug. The lips were thin, but when you pushed the lips back like I did with a piece of a twig, I could tell the creature had large teeth that were like humans, only much, much bigger. It was peculiar because the creature appeared mummified, solid like stone. But maybe it hadn't been there long. We couldn't be sure. The whole thing was an enigmatic mystery that left us with more questions than answers. However, the thing that had me and my father in total awe was the size of this monstrous beast. It was titanic in its proportions, even in death. It was giant-like. My father said he must be about 9 foot tall, and easily about 800 pounds or even more. The creature was solid, stocky and muscular, with exceedingly long arms and human-like hands and feet, with smooth nail beds. Bear in mind we'd never heard of a Bigfoot before, but one thing for certain, this creature looked half human and half ape. We were certain it was some kind of primate. We found the whole body was riddled with bullets from top to bottom, as if someone had been using him for target practice. However, it didn't take much for us to realize that it could have been the previous owner of the property that may have been the one who had killed this creature, which may well have terrorized him and his family. We could see, if it was alive, it would have been an apex predator, and certainly a formidable foe. Maybe this creature was the reason why the previous owners had gone to such lengths to secure their property and board up their windows. We couldn't be sure. But surely if it had been buried for so long, the body would have decayed. Instead, it seemed mummified. My father thought it might have something to do with the dryness and acidity of the soil that had prevented the body from decomposing, and that seemed like a plausible explanation to me. My father was dumbfounded by what we were seeing. As far as we could see, this creature was not known by science. My father felt we should notify the authorities about this strange animal that we'd found. We believed we had discovered an unidentified species, and also this formidable-looking creature could unravel the mystery of the family that had disappeared from this location. Well, so we thought. I heard my father on the telephone telling the police what we'd found, and then we were put through to the sheriff. To cut a long story short, the next thing we knew, a black van drove up our drive and asked us to show them the body of the strange creature. We noticed 2 men in black suits got out of the van. Within seconds they placed the dead creature in a body bag, then on a gurney, and popped it in the back of the van, and proceeded to hurriedly drive down our drive, even in those treacherous conditions, like a bat out of hell. It all happened so fast that we just went with the flow. We didn't ask any awkward questions. Another dark car arrived 5 minutes later. 2 military men, heavily armed with large rifles, went to investigate the wooded area on our property. They did a thorough search, seemed fully satisfied, sped away in the truck as fast as they'd come. It was all rather mysterious, I thought. Were they looking for more of these anomalous creatures, I wondered. The following day my father phoned the police to ask whether the unusual, outlandish creature that we had discovered had been identified. We were told it was a misidentification on our parts. The creature we had found was a bear. My father was furious about being fobbed off like that. He knew the creature we'd seen was definitely not a bear. "I think there's some weird kind of cover-up going on," he said. "I want to get to the bottom of it." I remember my father made some phone calls to find out what was going on. One day a very smart, opulent-looking limousine drove down our driveway at one hell of a speed. 2 small men in tight suits with dark glasses that were too big for their faces got out of the car. I was standing in the doorway. They asked me if they could speak to my father at once. The men were standoffish rude. Their tones were abrasive and curt, very businesslike, I thought. I noticed the skin on their faces was hauntingly white, so white that it didn't look natural or even human. They both sat on the edges of the upholstered chairs in our living room, and my father said they seemed hostile, cold, and very unfriendly. The one man said to my father, "We understand, Mr. Donahue, that you are causing a great deal of problems, asking all kind of awkward questions, stirring up a lot of discord. That's not a very nice thing to be doing, is it, Mr. Donahue? No one likes to have their feathers ruffled, do they? If you must know, I'm only trying to find out why there's a cover-up going on. I keep being told the creature we found in the snow was a bear. I assure you it was no bear. It had hands, it didn't have paws." "Mr. Donahue," said one of the men, "if you open your mouth about what you saw, there will be big trouble. You think the people that lived in this house of yours disappeared by accident? There are no accidents in this world, Mr. Donahue. But there are arranged accidents when people fail to comply with the rules. Then those people get eliminated. We wouldn't like that to happen to your lovely little family, would we? I see you have a very nice little daughter out there. I'm sure you would like her to have a good, long life. One day get married, have children of her own. I'm sure you're looking forward to being grandparents one day. You wouldn't want anything to jeopardize that for you, would you?" "Are you threatening me?" my father asked, his back stiffening. "Now, who said anything about threatening you, Mr. Donahue? No one is threatening you. We're only telling you what you already know. The creature you found in the snow that was taken away was a bear. We do not want you to go spreading around unlikely rumours, do we, Mr. Donahue?" "So you want me to pretend the creature I saw was a bear?" "Mr. Donahue, I'd like to make things very clear to you. The creature you found buried on the hilly slope was a bear. We would appreciate it greatly if you didn't discuss the matter further. Or the next time we visit you, things won't be so rosy. We'll see ourselves out now. Good day to you, Mr. Donahue." My father watched the men leaving, his face drained of colour. I could see he was trembling. "Is everything all right?" my mother asked. She looked at my father with a perturbed expression on her face. "You look as if you've seen a ghost, sweetheart. What did those men want with you? They seemed terribly official, rather like government agents." "I don't know who they are, but I would appreciate it if we never talk about the strange creature we found in the ice anymore. I think it's safe to say it was a bear." "But it wasn't a bear," said my mother. My father virtually growled at my mother. "It was a bear," he insisted. One day I happened to bring up the subject again about the quirky creature we had uncovered that freezing winter's day. My father told us we were never to mention the subject ever again under any circumstances, nor tell anybody what we'd seen. It was a year later, in March of 2017, we had an outlandish visitor to our home. He was a small man under 5 foot tall, with a square jawline and piercing brown eyes that were so sharp like a fearsome bird of prey. He asked if he could see my parents. My father ushered him into the kitchen, offering him a cup of coffee. He refused and asked for a mug of warm milk instead. "I won't beat around the bush," he said, "but it came to my attention that last year on your premises you discovered the deceased body of a Sasquatch that was later taken away by the authorities, who have asked you to brush the secret under the carpet. Am I right about this or not?" "Sorry, who are you?" asked my father, looking awkward. I could tell he was becoming nervous, passing my mother surreptitious sideways glances. "It doesn't matter who I am. Is the story true or not?" "No," said my father. "I do not know where you heard such outrageous claims. We did find the body on a hill a year ago, but I assure you it was only a bear. We never found a Sasquatch. I'm not even sure such an anomalous creature even exists here in North America." The man drank down his milk, leaving a rim of white froth around his dark moustache. "Very good. That's what I needed to hear. You saw a bear. Don't you ever forget that it was a bear." And then he was gone like that. "You see what I mean?" said my father. "I repeat, we must never talk about the strange creature we found buried on that hill. Someone out there is watching us. They're making sure we keep our mouths shut. They mean business." Fast forward to 2018, 4 years after our discovery of the strange hairy creature buried in our yard. I remember it was a gloriously warm, sunny day. I was lying on a towel on the grass next to my sister Janice. We were lying at the edge of the woodgrove on our lawn, which was always superbly mowed by my father. I suddenly had this horrible feeling that I was being studied by a pair of keen, curious eyes. But as I looked around our yard, I could see nothing there. "I think something's watching us," I told my sister Janice, but she looked up and glanced towards the trees and said there was nothing there, that I was imagining things, but I knew I wasn't. I could tell something was spying on us. I thought it might be the kids from next-door neighbour's property, as on many occasions we had spotted them playing in our woodgrove. My father turned a blind eye to it. He was good friends with their father. "I think it's one of the neighbourhood kids," I whispered. I was half expecting to hear some boyish giggles or to find ourselves being suddenly sprayed by water pistols, but everything was serene and peaceful, yet I still felt as if I was being studied. But I pushed aside those nagging thoughts. I told myself I was just being silly. "Are you hungry?" I asked my sister, opening the picnic basket my mother had packed for us. I pulled out a Tupperware container of sandwiches, handed my sister a ham and pickle sandwich. We began to eat our sandwiches and talk. Then my sister said, "I think you're right. Something is watching us. Over there, behind that tree. I'm sure I saw a movement." "Where?" I asked my sister. "Over there, to the right." "That's a tree stump," I told her. But then the tree stump moved. My sister was right. I adjusted my eyes to the light. I could see a pair of treacle brown eyes staring at us from about 7 feet off the ground. Then we saw her. I think she wanted us to see her. She was no longer attempting to hide from us. She was definitely female, not only because of her breasts, but her feminine energy as well. I was amazed that she was almost identical to the creature we'd found buried in the snow 4 years earlier. I couldn't help wondering if she was related to it in any way. The creature was similar to the one we'd found, only she would have been a lot smaller, weighed half as much, but she was still very big. I hasten to say that the creature seemed amused by the way I was eating my sandwich. She started to mimic me. She was a brilliant actress. She pretended to be eating a sandwich. I stood there staring at her in awe. I thought she seemed like a gentle soul. Not once did she threaten me or my sister, or give us any cause to feel afraid. She stared at us with brown congenial eyes that looked comical. Then she scratched her head thoughtfully for a moment. After a while she vanished like a ghost. We were disappointed that she had gone. We had enjoyed our interaction with her. Of course we told my parents what we'd seen. My father was visibly upset. "I don't want you to speak of these creatures to anyone. No one must know what you've seen. We don't want trouble coming our way." One day the neighbour's mother popped around to our house unexpectedly, which was a turn-up for the books. She's a lovely lady called Sheila, but shy, self-effacing and reticent, so my mother was surprised to see her. She'd invited Sheila to our home on numerous occasions before, but she'd always politely declined all our invitations. We knew her to be quite reclusive. Everyone accepted in town that she was a hermit. My mother had met her only once before, and on seeing Sheila at our front door, was really rather bewildered. She said that the woman seemed nervous and on edge, so she offered Sheila a chair in our kitchen. "I must apologise for my kids always playing in your woodgrove," she said. "I hope they're not too much of a nuisance." "They're welcome to play there," said my mother, "any time. Your woods are spectacular." "Well, they are pretty special," my mother agreed. "Sometimes I take our dogs there for a walk. It's lovely in there, so peaceful. A sanctuary, especially in summer." The woman paused. She twiddled her fingers awkwardly. Her lips tightened. "You do know you have a Bigfoot living in your woodgrove?" "Oh," said my mother, raising a brow. "Don't look worried. She's a gentle giant. My children found her nesting area recently, the place where she sleeps." "Oh," said my mother, not knowing what else to say. "Well, that's the reason why I'm here, really. I'm worried about the welfare of the Bigfoot. I know she might look intimidating and scary, but I'd hate something bad to happen to her. I'm looking out for her interests, you see. I'd hate your husband to kill her." "Well, why would he do that?" my mother asked. Because people do crazy things when they're scared. I worry if your husband was to see her, he might feel the need to shoot her, based on how large she is. But I want to assure you she's a benign creature. She would never harm us. In truth, we're a lot safer out there with her watching over us. Much safer, actually." "Well, that's an interesting way to look at it," my mother said. "Well, you may be wondering why I keep myself to myself. I'm very reclusive, I admit, and I'm sorry that I have declined many of your invitations over the years. I know it may seem awfully rude of me, but it's nothing personal, I assure you. Of course, some people have taken offence to my rejections. I wish they wouldn't." "I realise that," said my mother. "I knew you must have your reasons for being so private." Sheila looked grateful. "I'm glad you see it like that. You're a very perceptive woman." "I haven't got agoraphobia. It's not as bad as that. But I do have a nervous condition brought on by post-traumatic stress that has kept me a prisoner in my own home. I'm fortunate to be married to Miles. He's a very understanding, loving man. You may have noticed he does all the shopping, takes the kids to school for me and church, so that I can stay safely at home." "May I ask you what happened to bring about your post-traumatic stress disorder? Of course, if you don't want to tell me, I'll fully understand." "I was raped, attacked by a strange man when I was about 22 years old. I was taking a shortcut to my home through a heavily wooded area. This young man pounced on me from behind the bushes. He had dark hair and a long bushy black beard. I think he was round about my age. I remember he smelt of body odour. His bedraggled clothes suggested to me that he slept rough. His breath reeked of booze. It was the most terrifying thing that has ever happened to me. One minute you're walking peacefully in the woods, the next minute someone is on top of you, holding you at knife point and telling you to shut up or they'll kill you." My mother gasped, cupping her hands over her mouth. How horrifying! I don't know what to say. It could have been a lot worse. The young man could have killed me, but he didn't get the chance. She lowered her voice into a quiet whisper. I was saved by a Sasquatch. You mean a Bigfoot saved you? Well, I was fighting for my life as the man was raping me. I was screaming. Suddenly a big black creature appeared through the bushes, lifted the man off me. He ripped off this man's head, throwing it across the forest floor like a soccer ball. I was stunned. The creature was so kind. She was also female, very protective towards me. She knew at once that the man who had attacked me had meant to harm me. I quickly got dressed as most of my clothes had been ripped off by him. That Bigfoot escorted me through the woods. I never saw her again, but I never ever forgot her kindness. You don't forget it when something saves your life like that. Do you think the man would have killed you? My mother asked. I don't know. It's possible. I remember looking into his eyes when he was attacking me. He looked so soulless. Maybe he would have killed me to cover up his iniquitous secret. I don't know. It's something that haunts me to this day. Did you report the incident to the police? My mother asked. No. Are you mad? Of course I didn't. I was 22 years old at the time. I felt incredibly ashamed, embarrassed, humiliated even, as if it was all my fault. When you're that age, you can be very secretive and very self-conscious. I have no idea who the rapist was, but I do know his dismembered body was found in the woods. I will say this, I felt no empathy for him. He was a monster with a heart of stone. No one who does that is a human. And you've lived with the secret for so long? Sheila nodded, the tears pouring down her face like raindrops. My husband knows the story, of course. Naturally, he's thrilled the monster that attacked me is dead. We both have a soft spot for Sasquatch and the circumstances. I know there's stories out there that are horrendous, but my experience of these creatures has been favourable. You must excuse my impertinence, but don't you think you should have some kind of trauma counselling in the circumstances? That way you might have more confidence to live a normal life, to get out more, even go on holiday perhaps with your husband and kids. My husband's been begging me to have trauma counselling for years. It is something I am considering. It's a great idea. It must get awfully lonely for you tucked away in your home like that. If you need a friend, I'd be more than happy to come around and visit you. You would? Of course, said my mother, squeezing Sheila's hand tightly. Going back to the Bigfoot in the woods, you don't want to worry about that. I understand why you're so protective of her. My children encountered her one day when they were sunbathing and eating sandwiches. They saw a female Bigfoot copying them eating their sandwiches, but she was very evasive. That's her. I saw her once gliding past my window. We had a moment when our eyes met. She reminded me of the Bigfoot that saved me. I feel so much safer knowing she's out there, but you don't want my husband to shoot her. That's right. I can't help worrying about that. I have sleepless nights about it. You've nothing to worry about, Sheila, I assure you. My husband would never just kill an innocent creature for no reason at all. There'd have to be a good reason before he literally shot something. To cut a long story short, we still keep our mouths zipped about the creature we found frozen in ice. To this day, we don't know why the previous owners vanished from our home. The good news is that Sheila is receiving counselling. Over the last couple of years, she and my mother have grown very close. As for the Bigfoot female, she does have a male partner now. On occasion, we have spotted them both in our wood grove. I believe Sheila's right. Those creatures are benign. They're watching our back, and they are no threat to us at all. So there you are. That's my story. Wow, what an incredible story. Until next time, goodbye and good night.